know what to expect. They do not know what to do at that point of time. And it can be a very confusing time for the person who has lost somebody because of death by suicide. So what I'm going to take you all through today is to understand ways to identify it. And please understand that you may not, there is not like a checklist that if this person shows these signs only, does it mean that they are at suicidal ideation, or if they're going to attempt suicide. But these are signs which we notice very often in people who decide or who die by suicide. Okay, so the signs and symptoms of suicide are very similar to what somebody may be experiencing if they have depression, which is they definitely feel symptoms of helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness. They may keep talking about death and what is the point of life. Life is meaningless. Is there something where there is purpose to my existence? They start to isolate themselves from society. They start to isolate themselves from their family, their caregivers, their loved ones. They tend to withdraw and remain within themselves, within their own little shell. They sometimes may even express lots of anger, irritation, agitation. It could even be a result of some revenge they want to take on somebody. Or maybe they feel that suicide could be a solution to whatever life problems they have. Something you need to understand with that is that if a person shows any drastic changes in their mood, in their motivation levels, exercise, appetite, and discusses concepts of death, life, questioning life and purpose, these are signs and symptoms, and that's when you need to sit down with that person and have questions with them, or ask them how they're doing, what's going on with their life, and be there as an emotional support for them. The common triggers that are associated, or we see through research with suicide is when we talk about age and stage. So something we talk about in terms of adolescence, especially teenage years, right? There are a lot of hormonal changes that one goes through, a lot of new experiences one has. There's also a change in educational structures and institutions, right? We go from school to college, or we may even change different schools at that point of time because of different boards and academic pressures at that point of time, all of which could be contributing factors, or they're triggers to one feeling or thoughts about suicide, questioning their existence, because they're finding it difficult to cope with life and the demands and pressures of life. Number two is media. Something which I would like to talk about a little more in detail is the way the media portrays suicide. So I think most of us may have, has anybody seen 13 Reasons Why? When it was released at that point of time, it was one of the most watched shows on Netflix. And also at around that time, Google recorded the highest number of searches for the word suicide, ways to commit suicide, or ways to prevent it. This was one of the top searches Google had at that point of time. And the reason why was because of the media portraying in a very glorified manner. The way the media talks about suicide at that point of time makes people question their own existence, or question things about themselves. So I don't want to get into different celebrity suicides, but very often what I've noticed in therapy is that clients often come to me after a famous person has died by suicide and say, if that person can do it, why can't I? You know, that person's life looked good, but my life has these real struggles because I really have these financial insecurities. Why can't I just end it right now? The way the media talks about suicide, the way it's portrayed in movies or shows, is also a trigger. Society is also something which is commonly noted to be a trigger, particularly in India. And it's important for us to look at this in more detail because 40% of women globally who commit suicide are from India, and most of them are married women. Now, the reason why this is important is because of our patriarchal society to some extent, which may contribute to the woman feeling that they need to live up to these expectations, or because of the increased dependency they may have emotionally or financially on their family, and the lack of independence they may feel, the need to live within these structured, tightly guarded structures, which may contribute to this as well. Some other point which I want to draw a comparison with, which I pulled up through research, is that in the year 2014, 20,000 housewives died by suicide, and 5,650 farmers die by suicide. Now, the reason why I'm drawing this parallel is because we need to understand farmer suicide is something we spoke about a lot at that point in time, and it is important for us to discuss, and it's important to shed light on what's happening over there. But the interesting part is the media didn't cover the number of deaths by suicide for women. And what happens is that society often covers this concept of suicide by saying, how can you have a problem, or you can't talk about this, or log kya kahenge, this doesn't happen to people of my type or my kind of my social status or my culture. And just these conversations or lack of having these conversations can make it very difficult for a person to go out there and seek help or the necessary assistance they may need, and therefore difficult for them to cope with their struggles or their mental health, which contributes to that. So while we look at that as triggers, something which I want to also focus on is suicide during COVID-19. Now, what we notice, and research currently has said that a lot of therapists have noticed 70% increase in people talking about suicidal ideation. Just give me a minute, I'm sorry, the phone is ringing. Sorry about that. So they noticed 70% increase in suicidal ideation, which therapists have reported, because more people are sitting at home and having to confront a lot of their inner demons or their difficult stressors in life. And that's making them question about how are they going to cope with it, what is their plan for, what is their purpose of life, what is their reason for existence. And of which they've noticed that 88% of them come in talking about suicide because of their increased anxiety they're experiencing, financial stresses in life, the feeling of being isolated, the kind of insecurity they're experiencing. A lot of people right now have been stuck in the pandemic, or especially during the early stages of the lockdown, away from family, alone in cities, just because they work in their cities, in cities different from where their home is. Also because they're afraid to travel to go back home, because in their home they have elderly grandparents or elderly parents who they are worried about, that make they may be contagious with it. And all these restricting factors have contributed to them thinking about their existence or their purpose of life, and therefore suicide. And the Ludhiana district studied this and reported that there was an 11% rise in registered suicide deaths during the pandemic. So the risk factors usually noted in during when a person is more likely to have suicidal ideation or an attempted suicide is because if they may have some mental health difficulties in interpersonal relationships, they tend to be more impulsive with their behavior, they're unhappy with themselves or their bodies. They also seem to have some family stressors where there could be a parental separation or difficulty getting along with their parents. Economic status is a contributor for that as well. A traumatic child or sexual child abuse at that point of time can also be risk factors for somebody to experience any kind of suicidal ideation. Now, I've spoken about suicidal ideation a lot, and I think it's important to understand that suicidal ideation are thoughts about death, thoughts about ending one's life. Now, we need to understand that suicidal ideation does not always mean the person is going to attempt suicide. On the contrary, it's important for us to understand they're thinking about their purpose of existence. It doesn't mean that they are actively going to go out there and attempt it. It means that the person is definitely struggling emotionally. They need assistance at that point of time. It means that they need to find access so they can speak to somebody, or if you actually are yourself questioning about it, you need to go out and seek that help. It does not always have to be active. Active suicidal ideation when the person is now going to engage in some form of self-harm or attempted suicide. Now, self-harm is again something which may lead to an attempted suicide because the person has not taken the necessary precautions with self-harm. And self-harm comes from a place of significant emotional distress, where it's difficult for them to cope with their daily routine, their existence, but also the person may appear functional. That is, they may show up to college on time, they may be turning in their submissions on time, but the kind of distress they are experiencing is intense, where they are probably cutting or where they are burning themselves because experiencing their daily life is too traumatic for them. And they need some sort of vent and outlet to release the kind of emotional pain they are experiencing. It's important to understand that self-harm is is something that needs to be addressed through understanding that person's emotional distress. Stopping the behavior does not change the actual problem. It doesn't change the triggers for it. You need to take time out and ask the person, okay, life is difficult. What is causing that kind of distress for you? What is making it difficult for you to cope with a normal existence? Again, I keep repeating this because people keep thinking that, okay, if I tell the person to stop cutting, or if I tell them to stop hurting themselves, that means the pain has gone away. The pain is internal, the pain is emotional, and you need to address the kind of emotional distress they are experiencing rather than addressing the self-harm. Something else I want to talk about in self-harm is that I've noted a lot of clients who come from the queer community engage in some form of self-harm because there's a difficulty in them accepting themselves, and that is contributed by society not accepting them entirely and completely. Given the fact that right now there's a lot more voice for the queer community and that there's definitely more acceptance, but there is no denying that there is a struggle that they're still experiencing. So it is important for us to reach out and speak to them and make sure that they are coping well, or if they need an extra year to voice out what they're thinking, or for us to create a safe space for them. How do you know whether somebody has suicidal ideation or is going to attempt suicide or self-harm? You can ask them these questions, or if you notice the feelings of it. I'm going to leave this up for like a minute right now so you all can go through this as well. Usually these questions focuses on their ability to feel what are their feelings. Are they feeling helpless, hopeless, or worthless? Do they feel like they're a burden? Do they tend to usually have these bouts of rage directed at themselves or at their close friends or family members? Have they started isolating themselves from things which are familiar to them? How is their sleep cycle, which I mentioned earlier? Has there any changes you've noticed in it? Have they lost interest in their daily life or things that once gave them joy with what they were doing? These are questions which you can ask them, or you can observe in their behavior, which will help you understand the situation better. I'm going to play this video for you because very often when a person has suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts or is contemplating suicide, it's a conflict, right? Because at some point there is this need to live, at the same time there's a need to like end all my suffering. But going out there and talking about it is very difficult because the whole perceived log kya kahenge, or how will I be supported? Will people understand me? Or maybe this is just my problem, I need to solve it myself. And that seems to be a very difficult spot for people to ask for help. Also, we are conditioned to be self-sufficient rather than realizing we're a part of a community and a part of a supportive community. So I'm just going to play this right now so you all can
excuse me, ma'am. I don't.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, we can't hear the audio.
Okay, let me just play from my downloaded folder 1 second.
Yes, no issues, ma'am.
Okay. Give me a second. Can you hear it now?
No, not yet. No audio.
No audio? Okay.
How to ask for help.
Now?
We can share it on the
We
group
can hear.
later if there's no audio.
We can
No
hear.
audio?
Yeah.
We can hear it.
Please remember that if you have had thoughts about suicide in the past or are currently having thoughts about suicide, it is not a sign of weakness. You are not being selfish. You are going through a tough and difficult situation in your life, and you might not have access to sufficient coping skills to deal with the problem. And you might be experiencing a lot of different overwhelming emotions that can distort how you're currently thinking, and which might make you think that suicide is the only option. You might not want to ask for support and ask for help, but please understand that if you are unable to think of solutions other than suicide, it is not that other solutions are not available or do not exist. It is just that you cannot see them right now. The first step to believe that suicide is not the only option is to ask for help. There is nothing wrong about asking for help, and it does not make you weak in any way. So when you are asking for help, make sure the person that you're going to to is someone that you trust, someone you know to be accepting and compassionate. Make sure the person is someone who will listen to what you have to say and just be there for you at that moment. Avoid people who will try to argue about your feelings or question the validity of your feelings. Avoid people who will try to distract you or tell you to just snap out of it. Make a group of people who you trust and keep updating them about how you're feeling and about your emotions at different times of the day. Psychologists, therapists, counselors are always there to help you out, and they are equipped to help you to see different perspectives that might not be apparent to you. Please give them a chance. If you feel like there is no one you can trust and talk to at the current moment and you're feeling extremely overwhelmed, you can always call suicide crisis helplines. There are many different organizations that we will be putting below. You can always call them when you do feel a lot of emotional distress and when you feel overwhelmed. When you are talking about the problems at hand and when you are talking about your struggles, please do not downsize them by thinking that the other person might also be going through something or that the other person will not understand you. You'll never know unless and until you ask. Tell the person exactly what you are telling yourself in your mind. Try to find words that can describe your emotions and rate them on the scale of 0 to 10 so that the person you're talking to knows what you're currently going through and knows the extent of your struggle. Most importantly, tell them that you are thinking about suicide. Saying that I can't take it anymore or I'm done can be misunderstood and interpreted in many different ways. So tell the person that you're thinking about suicide. Tell them if you have a suicide plan and explain it to them. If it is too difficult for you to talk about it to someone, try writing it down and handing a note to the person you trust, or try sending an email. If you don't want to talk about it, you can also send an email to different suicide crisis helplines and they will help you out if you feel like you cannot talk about them, which we will also be noting down below. Please remember that by starting a conversation and asking for help, you are acknowledging your emotions, you are recognizing the emotional stress, and realize that the suicidal feelings are symptoms of manageable problems, and understand that there are options other than suicide which you might not be able to see at the current moment. If you feel like there is no one else to talk to, or if you feel like there is no one else you can trust, please contact suicide crisis helplines. We will be noting them down below and they will help you out. They will listen to what you have to say. If you feel any sort of emotional distress, do not, that we will be noting below.
So if you heard what she said, a lot about what she said was that if somebody is feeling or contemplating their existence or feeling that having some suicidal thoughts or ideations about it, it's important to go out there and speak to someone. It doesn't mean I have to mask my feelings and say that things are okay, I'm just feeling a little stressed and anxious about saying, hey, you know, things are difficult for me right now and it's difficult for me to cope and I actually am having some suicidal thoughts and some suicidal ideation. So like going out there and telling people about how you're feeling and also choosing the right person to speak to. If you feel that your friends or your family members who you speak to will dismiss what you're saying or say, hey, you know what, you can go out there, we'll go for a movie and things will be fine, or, you know, doesn't matter, you need a holiday or a break. If you think the responses are going to be like this from that person, that is not the person you need to go and speak to. You need to find a friend who's actually willing to sit there, listen to what you're saying, understand what you're going through. And that's how you begin the conversation, the dialogue of getting help. If somebody does come up to you and talk about their suicidal thoughts or any kind of self-harm, it is important for you to be sensitive, proactive, and open. By that, I mean, if we're very quick to dismiss what makes us uncomfortable because we do not know how to deal with it or we do want to process those feelings and emotions. If you do not know how to address it, listen to what the person has to say and say, you know what, I hear that is difficult for you, but I'm not equipped right now to handle it. Maybe I can go out there and help you find the right person to speak to. Also, what happens is that we tend to run away from problems or difficulties in life. But at this point of time, you need to sit with the person and be with them. Especially if the person is alone, go stay with them for a few days. Be there as a constant presence and a support that is not only emotionally present, but also physically present for them. if you feel the person is at the risk and it's very risky behavior, the person may indulge in, make sure you remove all sorts of like objects which may cause some harm to the person, anything sharp, any knives, any kind of medication from them. The most important thing which I feel we talk about a lot is that you need to listen to the person and respect what they have to say without judgment. That is, oh, you know, it's just thoughts in your mind. You can get over it, or if you exercise, things will be fine. Don't pass a judgment about it or quick fix solutions. Listen to what they have to say. Understand what's going through with them. And when you're having this conversation with them, you need to appeal to them, to the part of them that wants to live. That is, okay, right now, I hear what you're suffering, I know what you're going through, but try to help them find a reason to live, a reason, a purpose that will guide, which will kind of thread their existence from each day to the other. Also, what you have to do is that respect the person's wishes, whether they want to discuss this with their family or not. You don't have to do this. I'm sorry, I take that, rephrasing it. That you don't need to promise the person that you're going to respect that secrecy, because it's important for their physical safety at most. Don't make promises you can't keep at this point of time. And you have to give them hope. I mean, yes, life can look bleak at times, but there is a silver lining to everything, and you need to help them find that. And you have to help them find a professional support. Now, this could take the form of a helpline at that point of time as a crisis management, or actual access to mental health professional. These are two examples of conversations people tend to have when they are confronted with suicide. So somebody can come and say, hey, I have dark thoughts about my life and I feel depressed. And the other person can respond by saying, hey, you know what, that's okay, let's go home and have some fun, and that will make you in a better mood, that's not the ideal way to respond to it. On the contrary, you have to acknowledge the feelings and help them find a perspective that gives them hope to things. And you don't have to immediately throw that, oh, but you've done so well in your exam, why are you giving up? Or it doesn't matter if you failed, you can try again. Hear about the difficulty they are experiencing because they didn't clear that exam. Understand why they feel life is not worth living anymore for them. And once they feel fully heard, then you could probably come with a suggestion or provide that emotional support that they need. The language you use about suicide is very important, especially when you're talking to somebody who lost a loved one to suicide. Do not criminalize it. Do not make it do not stigmatize it. I think there's enough stigma around mental health. We don't need to contribute to it any shape or form. Understand that everybody is struggling and you do not know what their experience has been. So dismissing it is not helpful in any way. And in a crisis situation where somebody is difficult or is finding it difficult at that point of time, do not dismiss their feelings. Validate their feelings, acknowledge the fact that it's a struggle for them, and negotiate, which is that, okay, let's find a solution right now to get you out of this crisis, or for you to do something that will help you come out of this crisis. Open that dialogue, have that conversation, and move them towards it. If you're in a crisis situation, somebody has attempted suicide in front of you or has attempted suicide, it's important for you also to seek that kind of professional help, because there is some amount of trauma which we may experience at that point of time. So it's important for you also to go out there and speak to someone if you have been a part of that journey for the person. Lastly, there are helpline numbers somebody can reach out to if there's any suicidal ideation or any kind of self-harm. But it's important for you to understand helplines do not replace therapy or not replace any kind of mental health professional work in terms of psychiatry or counseling. They are just there to deal with a distress at that point of time. It's a very non-judgmental platform where they do not ask for context, they just focus on your feelings at the moment. So if you're dealing with this and battling with dark thoughts, so as to say, for a long period of time, it's important for you to seek the right kind of help, which would rather be in a mental health setup. Yeah. Okay. These were just the links from where I got the data from. And I think I can hand over to Dr. D'Souza right now.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am, for your presentation.
Thank you, Chirag. Our next speaker for this session is Dr. Avinash D'Souza. He is a consultant psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. He is the founder trustee of the D'Souza Foundation, a trust that works in the area of mental health awareness across all sectors. He has been awarded a doctorate in clinical psychology from University of Hertfordshire, UK in the year 2011. Dr. Avinash is a research associate at the Department of Psychiatry, LTMMC, Mumbai, and is the editor of various journals. He has over 700 publications in national and international journals and is the author of 12 books in the area of mental health. He is one of the few psychiatrists who, in addition to a psychiatry degree, has a master's in counseling and psychotherapy, an MPhil in applied psychology, and an MBA in human resource development. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward for an enlightening session with you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I thank Mahak for having me here.
Just a second, sir. Priyanka ma'am, could you stop sharing your screen, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
So you can continue.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and I thank Mahak for having me here. And I don't know if I pronounced it right. I'm sorry if I made a mistake there. But anyway, apart from that, I'm also very happy that I get to share the stage with Priyanka Kartari, who was my student, now Priyanka Verma. So I'm very happy about that also. And well, I have primarily just 10 things that I want to tell you, because when I was asked to speak and they said our primary audience may be medical students, and I work at Sion Hospital. I have been part of the psychiatry department for the last 12 years. And very often we have medical students that come to us with a suicide attempt or suicidal thoughts or feeling low and sad. So I think one of the main things, the main message that I want to give through today's presentation is that suicide is a serious issue. So if you have a friend, if you have a colleague, if you have an intern, if you have a medical student, if you have a resident doctor who says, I don't feel life is worth living, I feel suicidal, I feel I want to end my life, please do not take him lightly. Please do not think, oh, he's not going to do it, he's just saying it and he probably won't do it. No, it's very, very important that you should probably take him immediately to a psychiatrist in your institution for help. Second important thing is that don't leave anyone who is suicidal alone. One of the most important things I tell medical students is whenever you have a friend who is suicidal, please make sure that you're with him. Please make sure someone is with him 24 hours. Don't leave the person alone. Even if he's going to the bathroom, someone has to be around him, because we don't want anything untoward to happen. Please remove all sharp objects. As medical students, there is access to medication. Please see that no untoward medication is lying around. Please make sure that no needles and syringes are lying around. Please make sure that nothing which can be fatal is lying around the room. See that a lot of people are around him. They divert him. They make him laugh. They make him talk. They keep him occupied. This is very, very important. Second important point that I want to make is it is not shameful to seek psychiatric help. Very often I've had people who said, I felt suicidal, but I felt, oh, how can I go to a psychiatrist? I'm not mentally ill and I'm not that bad and I'm not mad and I'm not, that severely ill. Please visit a psychiatrist or a psychologist if you have to. Do not ever feel that, oh, I don't need it. Do not ever feel what people are going to say. Do not feel what my parents will say, what my family will say. There is no shame in visiting a psychiatrist. There is no shame in seeking help for mental health issues. Third point, which I want to make with regard to suicide is, anybody and everybody can be suicidal. So don't think, अरे उसकी फैमिली बहुत अच्छी है, उसका घर अच्छा है, वो पैसे वाला है, उसको कोई टेंशन नहीं है लाइफ में, तो वो नहीं करेगा. Anybody or everybody can be suicidal at some point of time in their life when they are vulnerable. Today, you may be absolutely fine. Tomorrow, you may be faced with a situation where you feel life is not worth living. This can happen. It's very, very important that we realize everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is at a risk. We need support. We need love. We need care. Be there for people when they need you. When you have a friend who comes and tells you, I want to talk about something, don't tell him, is it important? Baad mein baat karenge. Leave everything and talk to him or her. This is something which is vital when it comes to suicide prevention. Fourth point, suicide prevention has to happen everywhere. It has to happen at medical colleges, at a student level, at a staff level, at a nursing level, at ancillary staff level, at nursing student level, at a psychologist level. It has to happen at a postgraduate student level. It has to happen across all tiers of medical care, because the medical profession is strenuous. The medical profession is stressful. The medical profession takes its toll on you gradually. The medical profession can affect you because of the longitude of the course, because of the amount of academics involved, because of the effort needed, because of the uncertainty with regard to getting a postgraduate admission. There are multiple factors that can drive someone to the brink of feeling life is not worth it. Another very important factor sometimes is a failure in an exam. Failing in an exam is not the end of the world, even in an MBBS course. There is always a second chance. There is always a re-exam. There's always a chance that you can do well. Sometimes things do go bad. Sometimes it can happen that you may not be able to fulfill some criteria and you don't clear the exam. It doesn't mean you're going to be a bad doctor. Fifth point which I want to make is about medical students and other students that engage in non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. These are people who cut themselves, harm themselves, not with the aim of being suicidal, but because they believe that harming themselves is a coping mechanism for their stress. Please remember that non-suicidal self-injury is a stressful coping mechanism. It's a wrong coping mechanism, and it is a mechanism that can lead you to feel suicidal also. So if you have any friends who cut themselves, harm themselves, and they say, oh, we get pleasure in it and we're able to sort of cope with our problems because of it, please bring that person to a psychiatrist. Please see that they seek help. Next point that I want to make is that every person who is suicidal at some point of time has directly or indirectly conveyed the same to someone who has taken it lightly. So please make sure that if anyone conveys suicidal feelings, it has to be taken seriously. There may be suicidal ideas. There may be intent, how severely he wants to do it. There may be a past attempt. All these things are important to note. Even if the person is taken to a psychiatrist and psychiatric medication is started, that medication has to be supervised. The family members have to be informed. And you have to keep telling that individual, under no circumstance will you think of giving up your life. Your life is precious and you're important to us. My seventh point, which I want to make with regard to suicide prevention, is every suicide is preventable. And it's preventable because there's someone who could have done something at some point of time. At the same time, though we do so many seminars, we do so many events, we do so many things, suicide rates haven't declined. It is something that we need to ponder upon. Why is it, despite everything that we have done, all the awareness that we have created, suicide rates have never declined. Maybe we need to reinvent our suicide preventive strategies. Eighth, anybody who is suicidal has to be told that you being suicidal does not end your suffering. It just transfers it to other family members. A greater stress than someone who has attempted suicide or committed suicide is the fact that you have someone whose family member has to live with the fact that their child has attempted or committed suicide. The shame, the stigma, the guilt, the unhappiness, the loss is insurmountable and unrepairable. If anybody has a psychiatric disorder, this is my 9th point. Anybody who has a psychiatric disorder, sorry, my 8th point, and suffers from depression, anxiety, any form of psychiatric problem, he's always a little more prone to be suicidal. Anyone with a family history of suicide is more prone to be suicidal because they have a suicide model in the family. These people need to be looked at with increased attention. They need to be told that they should be allowed to sought help when needed. My 9th point. No one is worth giving up your life for. So you may have bad parents, you may have a bad family, you may have bad friends, you may be bullied, you may be ragged, you may be troubled, you may have bad faculty, you may have a girlfriend or a boyfriend that's left you. No one is worth giving up your life for. No one is more important than you. No one is more important than your own well-being and your self-care. Last point before we open the session for questions. Please take mental health seriously. A lot of people many a times think mental health is not important. Mental health is very, very important. If you're not mentally healthy, how are you going to help your patients? How will you pour from a cup that is empty? I just want each one of you to go home with one message. If someone is suicidal, we will immediately see that he seeks help from a mental health professional. 2, there is no shame in seeking help from a psychiatrist. And 3, every suicide is preventable and we will work towards making our medical college suicide free. If you go home with these 3 learnings, I think my time here is justified. I also want to congratulate the entire Mahak group because they've been doing such excellent work. I've been a part of some of their projects, though I haven't contributed much on the WhatsApp groups, but I see the amazing work that they're doing and I'm really proud of all of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, sir. They really had a deep meaning, and I hope everybody takes a good meaning out of them, a good take-home message. So after this, we'll be opening the floor for a live question and answer, and request all the participants to type any questions they have in the chat box, and we'll address them to our speakers. We have few questions already, and I'll start with them. So this is for Priyanka ma'am. Ma'am, ideally, what should be the tone when you're speaking to people who have suicidal tendencies? usually goes without saying that a soft tone should be maintained throughout. But sometimes, even post counseling, after a few weeks, they again may go into the state of mind of suicidal thoughts. In such cases, does a bit of harsh tone or a commanding tone help? What is your view on it?
I think, well, the tone naturally will have to be something which is soft, is gentle, and it's kind. But more importantly, you need to be empathetic to the person and what they are going through, and focus on the words and how you say it, and also give that person space to express themselves. When we become harsh and commanding, we tend to shut the other person down from expressing themselves and not coming again to ask for help or assistance, or to say, hey, I'm not feeling good. What you also need to understand is a few weeks of therapy alone will not change a person's perception completely or entirely. The fact that they're contemplating whether they should exist or not, or attempting or thinking about attempting suicide, means there is a real core deep concern that needs to be addressed, and that takes time. It takes time to be layered open. It takes time for them to understand where it's coming from, and it takes time for them to also apply those coping skills. um, a harsh tone never works. It just makes them shut down. It makes them less likely to seek help again, and it feels also kind of fake. If I went to this person and they supported me and they took me to a therapist and I'm speaking to the therapist, and now it's been a month into therapy and not much has changed or little bit has changed, and I go back to that person and they react to me this way, it makes the receiver of that feel that your care was fake. That if you were truly empathetic and you were truly understanding, you would be there to listen to me. I'm also going to put a disclaimer right now, is while you may hear the person, and we all go through our own emotional distress at different points of time, and you may not be able at that point of time, you need to tell the person that, hey, I love you, I want to hear what you're saying, but right now I'm having a little bit of my own stressors, so I may not be there for you 100%. You know, can you speak about this to another friend, or can you speak about it to your counselor right now, or can you speak to a helpline number? It's very important for you to also be emotionally present when the person's speaking. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, so the next question is, ma'am, in your presentation, you mentioned that a lot of people have been going through mental distress in this lockdown because of various reasons. So, how should one prevent deterioration of mental health during this pandemic, and also not to be affected by all the negative, the news, which are, the newspapers or social media, which are bombarded with all the negative news or thoughts, everything?
So a very big part of the pandemic has become increased isolation, and that has been a trigger for most of us, with the deterioration of our mental health or questioning what is our purpose. And I keep talking about purpose because we need to find a reason to wake up every morning and do something. And it could be something as simple as, I found a new passion right now to bake bread, or it could be that I want to increase my fitness levels. Find something that kind of guides you through each day. And I know it can be difficult, but try exploring what appeals to you. My basics for good mental health are always eat, sleep, exercise. Make sure you are exercising every day. Ensure you're eating healthy food and you're getting adequate sleep for 8 hours. Something you need to realize is that what this pandemic is also doing, it's redefining what the word normal is. So we're not going to go back to what life was for us. So you need to work towards building cognitive flexibility. That is, okay, I need to exercise every day for 45 minutes, but I can do a different routine every day. So one day I could do yoga, one day I could do cardio, one day I could go cycling. Try something different each day. So it gives you a freshness. At the same time, it's also taking care of your health. And I know this, we are all physically isolated, but that does not mean we have to be emotionally isolated from our friends. So make that extra effort to connect with people on video calls or on Zoom or on Google Meet. There are enough games which have moved to an online platform like Codenames. Play it with your friends, connect with them. And you can even join different sort of groups. It doesn't always have to be academic related. It could be something which is a book club with fictional books which have no way in relevance to what you're doing. This just joining different online groups is a great way to connect with people, engage in healthy conversations which don't have to just be focused on stressors in life. It could be focused on things to look forward to, on the positivity of things, or feel good factors for yourself. I hope I answered this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. So the next question is, if a person who's having suicidal thoughts has no one around him or her, can that person control that urge at that point of breakdown? And if yes, how does that person do it? Was I audible, ma'am?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, would you like to take? I mean, so would you like to take this question?
Okay,
Yes,
can you
anybody.
just can you repeat the
Yeah,
question, Chirag? Yeah.
yes, yes, sure, sir. So,
Yeah.
if a person who is having suicidal thoughts has nobody around them, and like if they don't have anybody around them, can they control that urge at that point of breakdown? And if yes, what can they do so?
Well, I think, see, if they don't have anyone around them in today's era, they have access to mental health care online. So they can definitely get in touch with a therapist or a counselor online. They can probably get on a video call and speak to someone. And most importantly, they have to tell themselves, or probably they can leave their own house and immediately go to a friend's house so that they have someone, with them. And then the urge is definitely controllable.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, sir. Um, okay. So there is one question I myself had. As you mentioned, sir, in your speech, that when person approaches it and you start with a therapy or whatever, you tell their parents or their kin. So, is a doctor, a psychiatrist, or psychologist legally required to tell the kin or someone? Is it something like that?
Definitely, it is legally required to, tell the kin, because you have to inform the family members. What if something goes wrong?
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll be handing over to Sanika, who will be continuing with the question and answer.
So, this was a question for ma'am. Since professional help isn't usually available 24/7 and like in all the cities and smaller towns, are there any good resources, websites on this? And is online therapy a viable option?
So NIMHANS has a 24/7 helpline number. Empower Minds is a 24/7 helpline number. I will reshare that screen if you like, with numbers, and all these numbers which are there, which I've shared earlier as well. We have recently gone and checked. So these are reliable resources, and these are reliable helpline numbers with very well trained professionals manning them. The second part of your question was, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Is online therapy a viable option?
So, online therapy is definitely a viable option. I think all of us right now from the field are only seeing, most of us at least, are seeing clients online itself. While there is a slight difference in our ability to connect with clients because you're missing out on a lot of non-verbal cues neck below, it is an effective option. It is still effective, may not be as effective as face-to-face, but you do see progress with your clients. You're still able to connect with them, and I have to say you're connecting with clients in a very different way, because now you're seeing them in their personal space. You're seeing them sometimes in the same spot which is the trigger for their emotional distress, and the way they talk about it and react to it gives us as psychologists more insight into what they are experiencing, and hence better able to some extent to help them identify coping skills.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question is, like, generally we don't talk about mental health even in our homes. How do we start a conversation about it at our home, and not just about suicide but mental health in general?
So, I mean, I'll begin about talking about suicide. I think what has happened right now in the media has definitely brought the topic of mental health and suicide to everybody's dining table or every sort of family WhatsApp group. And we hear different perspectives about what people think about suicide. And I think at that point of time, it is, I'm going to use the word responsibility to educate our family members on what suicide is, what a person's emotional distress is, and what one person may be experiencing and ways to reach out to it. So my common go-to is to actually share reliable links to articles by from the World Health Organization or authored by good researched doctors out there, and so help them educate them. I believe a shift in perception happens when I'm educating a person with reliable information. I also try to talk about people they would relate to. So, for example, celebrities and how it's difficult for them to cope with it. Or I will talk about movies and shows they watch and how a person was experiencing depression and what it looked like in a movie and what a friend could be experiencing that way. I think bringing media into a conversation to help the elderly understand has been a very useful tool for me when I want them to understand what schizophrenia is or what bipolar is and what depression can and cannot look like. I tend to rely a lot about media because that just increases one's empathy levels to see it unfold. So, would you like to add to this?
Well, I think the sole way is to start talking about it in the sense in general. So, ask your family member, do you know what depression is? Ask your family member, do you know what anxiety is? Ask him, do you know what a psychiatrist is? Do you know what a psychologist is? Do you know what mental health is? And, start talking about it on the breakfast table, in the lunch table, or probably even have a quiz which they answer. These are ways to get them talking about it and tell them that have there been times in your life where you ever felt life is not worth living? And you will have someone who will tell you, yes, I did feel it when I was in college, but then, I had this friend, he came and we were fine. And, so it's good to talk about these things because in India, what happens is generally taboo topics aren't spoken about. And I think topics which are sensitive aren't spoken about. So it's very important that, we break those barriers. And I think the younger generation today is very open to sort of break those barriers. Like at one time, no one would ever speak about homosexuality in the open. And today it's accepted, it's legalized, it's all fine. And, people speak about it. So why not mental health? Of course, I mean, people shut their doors, but then we will climb in through their balconies. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, Dr. D'Souza and Dr. Priyanka, if it's possible, can you please turn on your cameras? Thank you so much. You can continue, Sanika. Sorry to cut you in
Thank
between.
you. Yeah. So the next question is, what can you do when there is nobody near you? Like, can you control that urge at the point of breakdown? If yes, then what should you do to stop yourself from ending your own life?
Well, I think Priyanka, I answered it. Now Priyanka can give her view on it. Yeah.
So I completely agree with what Dr. D'Souza said. I mean, we do live in the modern age and everybody has access to some form of technology. And there are 24/7 helpline numbers. At that point of time, reach out to somebody on either one of these apps or on a helpline number. Even we have apps in India right now which are manned by responsible professionals. So reach out to them if you are from people. They do have access to, for example, a suicidal, so if you go, sit to them. I think the fact that you can identify that there is an urgent want to do something about it, so that there's hope. And use that hope to work through your feelings, to reach out, make that extra effort and reach out to somebody.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. We have another question, like, how do we help friends whose parents, How do we help friends whose parents are against the concept of seeking treatment for a mental illness, but they really need help?
Well, I think if you have friends who are above 18, they can decide for themselves. Most of you all in medical college are post 18. So I think they can definitely take a decision as an adult and seek help. I mean, I know their parents may be opposed at times to medication, they may be opposed at times to psychiatric help, but I think it's definitely possible. I mean, within a medical college setting, and I've had medical students who've actually gone and told their parents that, see, I'm a medical student, I know how antidepressants work, and I know I need it, and I'm going to take it. And I'm an adult, I'm 21, I know what is good for me. So the student has told me, I will take it. I'm not bothered whether my dad doesn't like me taking it or not. Also, I will add here, sometimes if we do have a student who is a little afraid of his parents and doesn't want to take a decision because the parents are saying no, I tell the parents, at least let him start therapy. You never know. I mean, I said it, he's only going to talk there, so what wrong can happen to him? I understand you're worried about the medication, but why not allow him to start therapy? So we at least get him to come in for counseling.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Sir, there was a question about, not a question, a request about, can you elaborate on how to approach an addict with suicidal ideation?
Okay, now see, an addict with suicidal ideation will be, approachability depends on the phase. So if he is totally intoxicated and suicidal, you have no option but to probably sedate him, or have 4 people carry him to a psychiatric ward and admit him at that point of time. If the suicidality is when in a phase where he's sober, then he'll need to be taken to a psychiatrist, and both issues, the substance use and the depression and the suicidality, will have to be treated concomitantly. So that's there. Apart from this, there is also a whole premise that under intoxication, the chances that you feel suicidal are far more. Under withdrawal, the chances that you feel suicidal are far more. So when we are treating patients who are drug addicts, we have to be very careful both in the intoxication phase, in the withdrawal phase, and even when they return home, because there's also a large amount of stigma associated with being admitted to a rehab center. So when they come home, a lot of people know. So that stigma is also something which drives them to get suicidal.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. The next question is for ma'am. Like, the symptoms of depression, loneliness, etc. are more evident in extroverted personality, since it is far from their usual behavior. Whereas in an introverted individual, it might be mistaken for symptoms symptoms might be mistaken as their natural behavior. How can we possibly know if an introverted personality is suffering from suicidal thoughts?
So, very often we say people with any mental illness or any mental health concern walks around wearing a mask. And that will be very true for somebody who has suicidal ideation or is thinking about attempting suicide. It's important for you to be aware and constantly check in with your friends that how are you feeling right now. And I'm going to say more so right now because of the pandemic and how we are experiencing it, but regularly checking in with them, how are you feeling? You will notice, and even in an introvert, that there will be some behavior changes. It is highly likely that they will probably start withdrawing even more from their friends, or perhaps they may suddenly become very extroverted in their behavior. Any sudden behavior change is an indicator that there has been some emotional change within the person. And at that point of time, you should go out there and reach out to them to say, hey, how are things going? How are you feeling? Give them a genuine ear at that point of time. I know we say that we have to look for things where they are questioning their existence of life. Even an introverted person will have some dialogue with somebody, hear what they're talking about. Are they talking about their existence? Are they talking about the purpose of their life or death? Even look at the kind of content they're consuming or sharing on social media platforms. The articles they're sharing on Twitter or the posts they're reposting on Instagram. Look for those signs. And the thing is that you will see Yes, subtle behavior changes, but there will behavior changes that indicate that there has been some emotional change. It usually is a sudden drastic shift from what they are usually behaving in. Yeah. So would you like to add to this as well?
Well, no, I think personality is, very small factor. I think it all depends on life situations and, so let's say today I have a road accident and all my family members die and I'm the only lone survivor. I don't think extrovertism or introvertism determines, whether I would feel suicidal or not. And I think people who are introvert are not mistakenly diagnosed ever as having depression, because I think they are quite open with a few close people. Introvertism doesn't mean they don't speak to anyone. They are quite open to a select group. It's only with a new group that they are little reserved. So they won't come laughing into a party and say, hey, hi, how are you, and hug you. They'll remain in a corner till they locate people who they know and they are comfortable with. So it's not that they are reserved in that sense.
Thank you, ma'am and sir, for that answer. So the next question is, yes, so for a person who is suffering from overthinking from time to time, which leads to negative thoughts and loss of energy, how can that person prevent it from reoccurring and going towards a state of depression? Um,
They must go to Priyanka for therapy. So, well, I think Priyanka, you answer. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Well, I think overthinking, I mean, so the question, I'm sorry, I missed the question, but it's basically about how overthinking and how does one stop themselves from doing that.
yeah, which
So,
can lead to a state of depression.
so
Sorry.
at that point of time, there are a couple of cognitive strategies one can follow which will help them with it. One of which is identifying whether the thought they are engaging with is a part of their present day reality or is a possible scenario in the future. And if it is a possible scenario in the future, that's when you disengage. And one of the useful techniques to disengage is using mindfulness, any kind of mindfulness strategy. My favorite one is to engage with the five senses. Identify one thing you can see in the room, one thing you can smell, one thing you can touch, one thing you can taste, and one thing you can, I think I said smell. So basically engaging your five senses at that point of time. Also grounding yourself into the present day reality with simple breathing techniques, which is 4 breaths in, hold your breath 4 counts, release 4 counts and hold. Practice this with slow deep breaths. Where I'm going with these examples of exercises is that for me to stop overthinking or entering a negative spiral of thought, I need to ground myself into what I have as 100% genuine fact about my present. If I'm going to work on assumptions, the only person that's being made an ass is you, because assumptions have too many variables in place and that doesn't work out long term. So ground yourself in the present, identify what is a part of your present day reality, and only focus on that. This will definitely stop the spiral from taking place, therefore stop any symptoms of anxiety or depression.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have 2 questions, like they're similar. First one is, are there any online support groups where you just taught yourself out and nobody would judge you for that?
All support groups are non-judgmental. I think all support groups aim to be non-judgmental. That's the basis of which it is. Because of the pandemic, I know all support groups have moved to an online platform. There is an institute called Hank Nunn Institute, which is Bangalore-based, which has moved the support groups to an online platform. Maybe you could check that out. Yeah. So, do you know of any other support group?
Well, I think, see, there are a large number of online support groups. I would only suggest one thing, that it's preferable that you go to a support group where you have a professional who guides the support group. It's very important, rather than only having patients. And one thing is just a very interesting thing that I would want to make is that there's also a support group for survivors of suicide. So people who have lost a loved one to suicide, so there's a support group even for them which is available. So support groups are there, but make sure that you have at least one professional leading or handling the group. That's important.
The next question is, are there free psychiatric consultations available online? For example, in cases where person does not have financial access or their parents are against seeking treatment for mental illness?
Right. Well, Sanika, I'll tell you this. There are a number of helplines which were launched during COVID, which are still active. And there is one which is Mission Zero Corona 2020, which was launched, where a whole bunch of us psychiatrists and psychologists are there. It's totally free. All they need to do is get in touch with us on WhatsApp, and we will either talk to them via WhatsApp message, or we'll probably talk to them on a video call. And if there's someone who you feel needs help, put him in touch with me.
So, one question. Someone has said in the chat that there's an app called Feel Joy.
Pardon?
Someone has suggested there's an app called Feel Joy.
An app called Feel Joy. Well, I think, see, if the app is a chat bot kind of app, then it's something I wouldn't suggest, you know. Or if the app is something which is, you know, an app which is a programmed app, and you don't have anyone else at the other end, it is not something that I would suggest at all. He may feel sad, he may not feel joy.
How can you help a person who is depressed since almost 20 years but himself or herself does not believe in therapy? Being a medical student, you still cannot do anything since usually family members don't get advice from you.
Well, I think I would start medication in such a patient first, if 20 years history is there. And of course, therapy would happen, but later, maybe initially medication followed by therapy. And as I tell most of my patients, लेके तो देखिए, फिर आपको पता चलेगा कि मतलब कितना फर्क पड़ेगा. Because very often, you know, they say, you know, this will happen and that will happen. I tell them, आप एक हफ्ता लेके देखिए, अगर आपको कुछ भी side effect हुआ, तो बंद कर देंगे. But अगर आपको नहीं हुआ और अच्छा लगने लगा, तो चालू रखिए.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is there any final message from both of you all that you would like to give to our audience?
Priyanka first, then I will say yes.
I think I build up from what Sir said earlier. I think one of the most important things to do with suicide awareness is to start talking about it. Only if we talk about it, we remove the stigma of it. And it's the only way we create space for others to approach people for help. And so very rightly said that every suicide is preventable, but we need to create spaces for people to go out and seek that assistance. Yeah.
Well, I think I will only tell people one thing, that, you know, seek help. Go and meet a mental health professional. Go and meet a psychiatrist, a psychologist. We are as human as you are. We are as like any other doctors. We're like any other professionals. I mean, we are very approachable, and I think people are aware. So they are ready to seek help. I mean, we are ready to sort of offer our help. So I think the thing is, let's just get rid of the shame and the stigma, and, you know, shed the stigma and seek help. That's very important.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am and sir, for joining us today and sparing your valuable time for us. I'm sure we are going to leave better informed. We are extremely grateful for giving us an important insight on this topic. So, once again, a very big thank you to our speakers, Dr. Avinash D'Souza and Dr. Priyanka Verma, for sharing with us all your mantras to stay mentally fit, and we are certain that all our viewers will be benefited with it.